Hello, Azeroth. Welcome to Challenge Accepted. I am Thomas, and I'm here with Frank.
Hey everybody.
And before we jump into this episode, we got a very special announcement. It is someone's birthday today. Happy birthday,
Who? I don't know who
buddy.
you're talking about. Thank you very much. Yeah. Doing what I love, podcasting on my birthday. There we go.
There you go, right on. And we just went to BlizzCon, so it's very fitting that we are talking
Yeah.
about World of Warcraft. We wanted to get this episode in before we went there, but like it was just a crazy week trying to
Yeah.
wrangle the group and get things sorted and places and yada yada. So we had an awesome time. I'm glad I got to celebrate with you before your birthday and at BlizzCon. But let's get into the whole story of Warcraft because that's
Yeah.
such a tentpole of Blizzard Entertainment. As I just learned, and you
hmm
schooled me on a lot, which I'm super thankful for. Yeah, what do you have to say about maybe BlizzCon or this movie?
So I'm gonna try to not geek out too hard. This is really like my Marvel more than anything else. Like I do know a lot about this stuff. I say that, and I'm gonna say something wrong, and then people are gonna hit Twitter. So calm down, guys. But yeah, I love this stuff, and BlizzCon is the event that we all look forward to the most every year. It is my dedicated vacation. A lot of times, like I don't care about going camping or anything like that. I'm going to BlizzCon, so we're already looking at hotels for next year. Matter of fact, and
Nice.
yeah, that's just what it is. So I'm happy to talk about Warcraft. I'm gonna try to not geek out too hard. We'll see.
All right, all right. Well, as somebody who didn't know anything about this, like obviously very familiar with the name, I was familiar with this movie coming out too. I didn't see it
hmm
just because, the lore is so deep. But this movie, I think, tries to dive into it. But before we get it any further, let's just do the 2 minute breakdown
Okay,
on Warcraft.
here we go. Starting that right now. We start with the orcs of Duratan. Uh, they're going to be kind of invading a new world. They're using something called fel magic. It's pretty new to them. It's kind of new to everybody in both Duratan. I'm sorry, Draenor, and definitely in Azeroth. We're introduced to their world. It's dying. They don't necessarily know why it's dying, but they do need a new place. They invade Azeroth through a portal. We see Durtan, who's the chieftain of the Frostwolf clan. His wife Draka is pregnant, and when they go through the portal, it creates a stillbirth. Then Gul'dan brings the baby back to life using fel magic, which turns him green. That turns all orcs that are green are because they're empowered by fel magic, and basically all orcs in World of Warcraft are that way now. We are now introduced to the humans, which is pretty interesting. It takes that long for us to get introduced to the humans. We
Mm-hmm.
have Anduin Lothar. He's like the best knight in town. We have King Lane Rin, generally a pretty nice guy. And then we're also introduced to Khadgar, who's a young sorcerer, and but he's like destined for great things. You can kind of get that vibe. Khadgar discovers that there's fel magic being involved, and he knows of the rumors, and so he wants to go tell Medivh, which is considered the guardian, which is like the head wizard, the sorcerer supreme, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we have the humans start to actually find run into the orcs. There's a skirmish. There's a lot of learning of each side. They find Garona. Garona is half human, half orc, and she's able to speak both languages. She learns from the slaves that are in the caves
All
or in
right.
the
20
cages.
seconds, bud.
Okay. God damn it. Medivh is Sorcerer Supreme, but we find out that there's a greater power than regular arcane magic. He's been delving into the Fel. He invited the orcs, Gul'dan especially. Big battle at the end. Orcs actually win.
Yay. Pretty
God damn it.
good.
That was
Nice.
a
It's
whole lot of
funny.
the first 20 minutes of the movie.
You know, for anybody who's listening week in and week out, it's funny how much we talk about the first 20 minutes of the movie for like a minute and a half, and
Yeah.
then we like rush the like 75% left of the movie, in like 30 seconds, which happens week in and week out. We gotta I don't know. That's just how it's gonna go.
Yeah.
But yeah. But it's so rich, right? And I think that's the job of most movies is establishing the characters and the worlds that we're going to be living in. And it's a very interesting world that we're thrown into. We do start with these orcs. Duratan, from the jump, you already see he already seems like he's good. whatever that
Yeah.
means. Like he's trying to take care of his family, he's trying to take care of his tribe, but you can also tell that there's some orcs out there who are like conquer, conquer, conquer. We need to take over everything, right? And I guess that's coming from Gul'dan.
So Gul'dan is a warlock of theirs that is very powerful, and he has found this new magic, and it's corrupted him completely. And we won't go into the demon side of things, but basically it's a demon magic. And his people, the orcs, generally their magic comes from nature. So they're shamans. They, rock, fire, lightning, water, stuff like that. It's all nature based. So he's got this new magic that is even stronger and can be bestowed onto the warriors that don't have magic. And so it's like, oh, this is great. And their world is dying. They don't realize, because part of the fell magic is that it uses life to create its magic. They don't
Right.
realize that he's reaping from literally the earth, from Draenor. So they think, oh,
Okay,
okay, we just
got
got to go to
it.
a new planet. Yeah, that's why they
Yeah.
have to move. And later on, Duratan catches that. It's like, wait a minute,
Yeah,
we're already
yeah.
killing Azeroth here too.
Yeah, and I think they foreshadow it a lot, right? Right when Draka jumps through the portal and is forced to give birth, you know, as the baby comes out, we can see that it's lifeless, and he pulls the life from a deer and then
Yeah,
shoots it into the baby. And you're like, oh, okay. I think that's kind of the sign. It got a little lost on me as to what the fell was and how it works because for me, I think the there was a lot of signs that Medivh was also going to be turning evil
yeah.
and that he was using fell magic, but it was like, okay, wait, how does this work? I still am a little confused. Were they pulling from almost the same pool, if you will? That like how was Medivh opening the portal because he was using fell magic?
So Medivh discovered fell magic through his research, because Medivh is his job as guardian is to know all magic and is to protect Azeroth from demons. Because to not get into it too far, but the demons is an army, this burning legion that's out there, and they are meant to destroy another army. It's a whole thing, but it is kind of a constant threat in the World of Warcraft is that demons are coming at some point. We fought them back twice now in the game, and so he's kind of has to know about it. So he discovers it, and then like, oh, it's really useful. It's like Spider-Man's like, oh, symbiote sure makes me strong against Venom, that kind of thing.
Ah, good example. I understand that reference.
Yeah. So
Okay, yeah, okay, that makes a ton of sense. Like, I think for this movie, that was one thing. There's a lot of awesome stuff in it. One thing for me was kind of hard to follow because of the names and because
yeah.
of there is a little bit of jumping around between the different factions, right? We get different characters in the alliance that we're following. We get different characters on the orc side we're following, and these names are very unique. Like you don't get a lot of time with every character, and they're not introducing themselves every time they walk in the room. So there was also that. I'm like, wait, who are we talking about? And is the fella person? So by the time I kind of understood towards the end that it's that magic and stuff, I think it started to make a lot more sense. But it was a little tricky, I feel like, in the beginning.
I have a feeling that that's probably one of the problems with this movie. As World of Warcraft players, everyone that I've talked to appreciate this movie. Not necessarily love it or like it, appreciate this movie because it's stuck pretty closely to the letter of the law. And I think that there's so much lore in this world. I mean, a grain of sand in the world of Warcraft that I
Right.
think they kind of had to just assume that you knew some of it already. And you're not
Yeah.
Marvel. If we could assume that Spider-Man. We're gonna keep using Spider-Man. We could assume Spider-Man got bit by a spider at this point, but that's what Warcraft had to do, and only the Warcraft fans are like, yeah, yeah, we know about demons, we know about this, blah 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 blah. Fell, of course, it's old school stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I find maybe that this movie, again, with a lot of amazing things in this rich history, maybe had a tough time finding a balance between people who are dedicated, diehard fans who knew everything, and people who are new to the franchise and, we're just trying to be caught up. And I felt like
yeah.
sometimes I was just kind of getting pushed through to the next scene. But yeah, it's because it's so dense, it's so rich. I think it just maybe had a little bit of a tough time finding that balance.
I will say, as a World of Warcraft fan again, I really and you went to BlizzCon, so you've experienced a little bit of this now.
Yeah,
Blizzard
for the Alliance,
kind
right?
Oh, dude, I will quit this podcast so fast. That's
Oh
the
man.
most serious turn I've ever taken.
Yeah.
No,
Oh man, face just got so dead serious there. I was like, ooh, I'm in trouble.
yeah. But you've experienced this a little bit. Blizzard did not give a shit if this movie did well. They were so more focused on making sure it was done right. And you could see it like I'll go into it. I know like there's documentaries and stuff like that done by Blizzard about the making of this movie. I've seen them all. And yeah, it was not about it being a success. They didn't care about that. They wanted to make sure that the story was told well, and they literally refused directors, well done directors, because they wanted to make sure the Alliance were the heroes. And the guy that got the job, the big reason he got the job is because he's like, no, the story's wrong. You got to show the Horde also have good guys, and that's the whole point of World of Warcraft. Like, boom, that's the guy. And like, they hired like the composer for this. They hired because he's a raider, and they're also very well known for what they do. But they hired people who play the game to make the movie. And in the background, like the extras, you actually Chris Metzen, the guy you saw like shouting on stage, he's in the background as a merchant, stuff like that. You could see them all in the
Oh
movie itself.
man, that
Yeah,
guy is so talented. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, the way
He's one of
he
the producers. He
speaks
actually
and
helped make this. Yeah,
oh, he helped make the movie.
yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. He's incredible, man. Put that guy on stage announcing anything, and it's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I felt that they did a good job of showing the orc side of things. We get Durotan, and he's for me the most sympathetic character in the movie besides Garona. Like he was the person I felt like I
Yeah.
was rooting for the most because he is trying to be this noble leader, this just leader. He cares about his people. He realizes that there's something also bad that's happening from his leadership of Gul'dan,
Yeah.
and that there's probably something bad that's not just going to affect this new world, but also affect his own people in a very bad way. And he seems like one of the smarter orcs because he's catching on to things. And also, like, he's got a family on the way. You know, he's got a new son
Yeah.
that's born, and he wants safe and a thriving life for him in this new world. I thought he was one of the best done characters in this movie. He was the guy
He's
I wanted to
such a great
succeed the
character.
most.
Yeah. And his wife Draka is a really cool character too. So what's important too is so the Horde, especially at this time, is different tribes of orcs, and they're always led by the strongest orc. But each tribe has their own war chief, and his tribe, the Frostwolf clan, which is really cool when he's actually wearing the wolf at the final
Yeah,
battle, because
it
that's
looks
actually
sick.
how he is in game. And they're from the north west, and they're kind of isolated, so they're a lot more about family. They're a lot more about the hunt. They're a lot more about Earth, and so of everybody, they're more attuned to peace. And like the other ones, which are like the war song and everything like that, they're more warlike. They've been fighting the
Yeah,
Jedi this whole
conquer,
time and
conquer,
stuff,
conquer.
conquering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while they definitely all team up because that's the way of the old ways, which you could tell in this, they give you a hint of it. They are definitely the old ways. They're definitely about tradition and ritual. They're definitely about honor, and that supersedes even Gul'dan. And but his tribe coming in are kind of the outsiders because they are more of an peaceful, noble clan than the others, I would say.
Yeah, and we even get to see it at the end, right? That's kind of the finale where Lothar has to fight, what is his name? Blackhand?
Blackhand is the one he fought. Yeah,
Right. And since he beats him, he's allowed to go free because that is the ritual, right? Like
yeah,
I guess if you
that's
do
for the
one-on-one
horde.
combat,
Yeah.
yeah, then you
So
have to
it's the
abide by it.
yeah, it's the Makgar. You can't use magic in it any way. So when Gul'dan's doing it earlier on with Durtan, he's pulling his life away, and everybody's like, "What the hell you doing, bro? No magic." And
But
it's a
they
really
kind
big
of let it
important thing.
slide at this point.
Yeah, because he is like he's really important. So they're like,
Yeah, he's the
okay,
top dog.
yeah, but it's clearly turning people against him. He's clearly not. He's definitely not gaining any fans from that fight. But then later on, when Blackhand's doing the fight and Lothar wins outright, you see them all saluting Lothar, their
Yeah.
enemy, on the way out because that's the tradition. He fought well, no magic. That was honorable, and that to me, like all the other directors that wanted to just make this, good guys are humans and everybody else are villains, you're missing that part of it, and that's really important.
Right.
All of those orcs, except for Durtan, were essentially bad guys just a bit ago. They were just killing all these humans, but they see the respect, and that's important. And I think the movie did a pretty good job of showing that. There's a tough balance there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does really strike that. And And based on your love for the Horde, based on everybody else at BlizzCon, I mean, there's a few Alliance fans, but there's a lot of people who are. What do you think about them?
They're scum, racist. Honestly, just because we don't look as handsome as you, get out of here.
But right, so yes, I think each side needed to be shown in the best light and what they're about, right? You don't get fans like you and the rest of the people at BlizzCon who are for the Horde unless there's some substance there.
Yeah,
And I think this movie does a good job. In that last fight in particular, the only thing I could say is like I wish it was a little bit longer. I wish it was
I
a
agree.
little bit of a struggle for Lothar to kind of
Lothar.
win. It's just a little too fast, but uh, you he has to win because he's the Alliance's champion.
I'll give you a heads up. If there's a sequel, he would die at the end of the sequel. If you want to know story wise, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and Black Hand is meant to be like, he was this guy who was like, he was the leader of the military side of all the orcs of the Horde, and so
He had one of
he
the
was
coolest
seems.
designs. I
Oh yeah,
love
I've
those
actually got
two.
those shoulders. I've gotten those shoulders in game that he's wearing.
Sick.
That are
What
so
it,
dope.
what is it like? I don't know what they look like. Like
Two
T-Rexes or
raptors.
like Alec. What is it?
They're two raptors. Like, yeah,
Sick.
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that looks pretty badass. I dig
Yeah.
that for sure.
So, yeah, but there was, he killed the general essentially, the big general, and so there was all kinds of respect with that. And just like when King, God damn, I can't remember his
Lane?
name, King Lane, is about to die, he knows that like it's more important that somebody that we can trust gets this honor because there's honor based in the Horde. So he lets not Gamora, God damn it,
Garona.
Garona, was in everything, Garona
Yeah.
kill him. And Garona
Look at
hates
me. I
this,
know
and again,
everything
that's
about
Endgame too.
Warcraft.
Endgame as well. Garona is seen as like a tragic hero because she didn't want to have to kill the human, but she did, and all of a sudden now she's seen on high. And what's next for her? She becomes the emissary for the Horde and the Alliance, the one red phone between the two, because she's
Right.
of both worlds.
Yeah, let's talk about Garona for a little bit
Yeah.
because she, again, is another one of, I think, the better done characters in the
Hmm.
movie. I felt a lot for her, like, being a half breed. One, I was like, how did they make her? Because I'm like,
Medivh
which, oh, Medivh?
is her dad.
He got with an orc? Hot.
Yeah. Because when he was a young man, he was like out and about scouting around. It's complicated. Don't look into it too much. They also,
No,
him,
that's what I want to do.
Medivh and Garona also have a kid later on. So there's that as well. We don't need to ask questions about that. But yeah, he is her dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I was like, I was really trying hard not to think, like, how was she born? Because, like, at
Yeah.
some point, an orc had to get with a human, and, like, I don't know how that
I think
fits.
luckily it was a human male because I think if it was the other way around, it would have been even worse. But yeah, it was a human male and a female orc. And
Right on. Okay. So, yeah, we get see Garona. We feel bad for her. She's very feral in the beginning, very orc-like, very about the traditions, and she's kind of explaining that to the human side.
yeah,
And they're trying to understand their customs. I feel like the king is very receptive to her, and also the king's wife, who is Lothar's sister. Now, I understood why that needed to be in place for the story, but it felt to me, just kind of the outside looking in, it felt a little convenient for the story, but at the
hmm
same time, like her transition, it seems so necessary to carry her arc and then to eventually be fighting on the side of the alliance at the end, and then to gain the king's trust to then, like you were saying, be the emissary between the orcs and the alliance.
one of the important things that is conveyed in the movie but not well is that she's hated by the orcs. The orcs hate her because she's
Yeah,
a half blood. And so that's kind of like she respects them, especially Duratan. But there's also the whole thing where it's like, yeah, you know, she could easily leave the Horde and fight for the Alliance because she sees that there's mostly bad people in control of the Horde right now. And she's an outsider, so it doesn't really matter either way. She it
yeah,
comes in not speaking English, by the way, or common, and then she learns it from the people that are in the cages there, the
right.
farmers that they capture right off the bat. So she's very smart. She picks up on stuff very quickly.
Yeah, you can see that. I think the only scene that really demonstrates that she's hated is when she's captured on the, in Azeroth, I guess.
Yeah.
She's in that cage, and that orc who's also captured calls her a
Mhm.
certain name, and that
Yeah.
name is escaping me right now. We'll insert it.
I don't know her full name. I know her full name is Goron Orkenhalf, something like that.
Yeah,
Orkenhalf.
but there's like a
Yeah,
term they use that seems like it's a derogatory
yeah.
term
Essentially
for like
scum.
half breed. Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, but it's thrown in there. She starts formulating this relationship with Lothar and Khadgar is already on her side. He's like, she's cool, like she
yeah.
can help us, you know. I think it's interesting the relationship she forms with Lothar. I wasn't expecting any type of like physical relationship in this
Hmm.
way, but it's there. And I don't know if I necessarily buy that, but I also feel like there needed to be this understanding between them where these two champions would kind of form this trust and then
Yeah,
kind of go their separate ways. It is interesting at the end where he thinks that she's killed the king and then wants to basically take revenge on her is the way
of course.
I kind of
Yeah.
feel that we're left with.
It all happens far too fast in the movie, of course. The events of the movie actually take place over a span of a few years. But yeah, it
Really?
happens.
I didn't realize that.
Well, in the normal story, that would take a few years to happen. But yeah, in the movie, all of a sudden it's like, oh, Garona's discovered. Oh, she's trusted. Oh, she's allowed to kill the king. Like it all way too quick, and
Right.
that's definitely a problem with the movie. The movie had, is they had to speed things up a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think some of that would have helped out the movie a lot.
Yeah,
You know, even some time cards like a year later or something like that, because
yeah,
there's an eventual point where Duratan decides to trust the humans. I think he gets a message to Garona to say,
hmm,
hey, bring the humans over. We're going to talk about a plan so we can overthrow Gul'dan.
yeah,
And this betrayal happens in the valley. At first, I think they're scouting them from afar, the orcs,
hmm,
and you can see how they're kind of slowly taking over and killing the land wherever they take over.
yeah.
But then there's that meeting in the valley, and I feel like that's one of the cooler scenes in the movie. We get this final point between the Alliance and the orcs, or I guess like the Frost Wolf tribe,
Hmm.
and they're discussing how they need to take over Gul'dan, and basically it's like a trap and Gul'dan's forces are there. I think it's one of the cooler parts of the movie because that fight is pretty badass,
Yeah.
and it leads to Lothar's son being kind of out, stuck behind this force field
Yeah.
that causes Black Hand to kill his son,
and
and
and it
that's one of
shows how
the
like evil Black Hand could be because he like looks, he's like watching Lothar as he stabs Cullen, and it's just it's so vindictive, and he either throws him against the lightning shield as well, which
yeah, his
Medivh's
like
doing the lightning
lifeless
shield.
body.
And that's the other thing too is at the time Lothar's like take down the shield to Medivh, and Medivh, who is Medivh already is kind of like he's sorcerer supreme, but he's been doing it for so long that he kind of thinks he's above humanity a little bit, because he's like the best. And
Right.
so there's a level of that's like, who cares about your son? I'm trying to protect you right now. But, he doesn't have that respect for humanity anymore.
Yeah.
One of the,
So do you think having evil sorcerers on both sides kind of showed that there was good in both factions, at the same
yeah.
time there was a villain in both factions?
And also, both wizards or sorcerers we find out later on are working together to gain as much power as possible. So it's
Right.
all about these two basically just power hungry people. One is pulling from life itself, the other one's pulling from the alliance, and they're both trying to gather their forces just to make themselves, nobody else, as strong as possible. Even Medivh
Yeah.
kills his own assistant, who's been his assistant for his entire life. And after the event of this movie, eventually Medivh resigns. And I think he dies pretty quickly, but he basically resigns the guardian role and gives it to Khadgar. And so, yeah,
Oh, okay. They don't say that. He's also like a shithead Khadgar, so it already makes you feel like he's not that awesome. But everybody's calling him champion. I was like Ben Foster. It's been a long time since I've seen him in something. I was excited
yeah,
about that. His character was hard for me to root for in this movie, though. He always felt like he was a villain from the jump, and so that's why it wasn't really a surprise when he goes full demon mode and turns green and
yeah.
gets like the spiky beard, all of that. It felt a little obvious to me, but I don't know. Do you think it helped the movie or hurt the movie that they had these two villains on these sides, and it felt like we're kind of just getting them sped up towards these transitions of like they're both full evil now.
Yeah, it fully hurt the movie, of course. This knowing now how well a series can do, that's what this needed. It needed time to develop. you shouldn't have shown Medivh already being so powerful that he's kind of ignoring Khadgar, because we just got done meeting Khadgar and liking him. He's a spunky kid who knows magic. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like all of a sudden you're going to have that kid bump against somebody who thinks he's better than him. Obviously, it's going to make Medivh look bad. And yeah, Medivh is that person, but we don't need to know that right away. And
Mm-hmm.
Gul'dan walks in the room looking evil with the horns on his back, already breaking
Right.
through the spikes. And
Yeah.
those get bigger the more fel he pulls in. And
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't
so
know
it's
that.
like if you had started out where like, maybe you make it to where, oh, our land is dying. Gul'dan, he thinks he could open a portal and like he's trying to be a savior to his people. That would have been a lot smarter than just being like evil right off the bat. I don't know. We could have had fun.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on all that. I think that they were, yeah, there were some things I think that were just a little too obvious. But again, there's so much lore, there's so much history. It was like, what do you give people up front, and what do you let them discover? And
Yeah.
there was a lot. We've already talked about so many different characters. King Lane, did he and does he have a bigger role than what we had in the movie? Because I like that actor. I think he also played Howard Stark in one of the movies
Yeah.
as Tony's dad. He's fantastic. I thought he played a very noble king, but it was his character didn't feel like it's fleshed out. Is it more fleshed out in the
His
games?
character is not meant to be fleshed out. It's his son that's the main character for the Alliance. And so he's really meant to be the Uncle Ben. And
Got it.
it's funny. He's supposed to be Uncle Ben, but I hate Spider-Man with all my passion. Like he's the main bad guy to my side.
Right, I
And
gotcha.
yeah, so generally he's not meant to be fleshed out. Like what he does for Garona is kind of the main thing he's gonna do in this situation. And Lothar is kind of their regent for a long time through what's called the Second War, and then eventually the son will take over for a long time. His son will be their leader, their main leader for a very long time, and then eventually he
Understood.
dies to the demons during the second invasion. Yeah,
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, there was that arc made a lot of sense. It was cool that, he makes this ultimate sacrifice, one for his people, but also that he sees something in Corona to trust her to be like, hey, we need you to kind of fill this void that we don't have,
yeah.
again, walking in both worlds. And I feel like I just wanted to understand his situation a little bit more. And I also feel like, yeah, I don't know. It felt a little rushed, I
To
guess what I'm trying
speak
to
on
say.
that, one thing that's really neat about this grand story is you see how open he is to other people right away with Garona, and but also like he has the alliance, has elves, well, they're called high elves. He has dwarves. There's gnomes in there too. Like he obviously is aware of other people and embracing them. There's a lot he doesn't embrace, which is a problem, but for the most part, and so he's open to Garona. Then his son, who will eventually take the role, only really knows the fact that his dad died to the Horde. So he comes in with full vengeance and is a wartime king. But then his grandson, who also was raised in the war but went to go study, he became scholarly. He followed Khadgar's beliefs a lot of times, and Khadgar, which by the way is a friend of both Horde and Alliance. So the son Anduin, which you saw in the trailer for the new expansion, remember he's the one that was like crying at the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he is much more like his grandfather. He's open to other races because he's lived in this war and sees it. No, there's another side, and there are good people on that side. He's actually his best friend is Bane Bloodhoof, which is one of the leaders of the Horde. And so but the middle one, this is all setting up basically the son being a jerk, but then the grandson to follow in his grandfather's footsteps.
That's awesome. Okay, and that makes a ton of sense. I mean, everybody's reaction at BlizzCon, seeing Anduin kind of sitting there, tearing up, an orc walks through, and you see
Yeah.
the big sword in the sky. Everybody's reaction was like dumbstruck, just like, "Oh my God!" Freaking out. The cheers, you could hear it through the entire conference.
That's
Oh
good
my
stuff.
God, man! It was,
I have
yeah, it
I
was
have
so
watched
sweet.
that trailer a lot since coming back, but because that CGI is, I mean, honestly, I think it's the best CGI. Incredibly, I think it's better than the CGI we got in this movie, which at the time I thought was very good.
So thank you. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Now, in a world where we've gotten so many great MCU projects and CGI, Avatar, The Way of Water, and all of these things, it's like it is a little tough it looks great, like for what we got at that time,
Yeah,
and some of the orcs look incredibly well done. Garona, compared to some of the orcs, it feels like she stands out a lot because she's
too much. Yeah.
practical. Yeah, and then the orcs are CGI, and they look great. Like I almost feel like they should have just had her maybe be CGI too, but I don't know how that romantic relationship would have worked. But I think it's maybe something as you go back, and if you tried to get new people to watch it now, I think that'd be
Mhm.
something that would be a little bit of a barrier because, yeah, the CGI compared to the practical is pretty different.
And I think that's the reason they made her practicals because she was going to be with the humans the whole time. And when you have the two standing next to each other, then it's bad. Um, and I remember very well that at the time the community was like, the orcs look great, the humans look like shit because the
Oh,
armor
right.
looked too chunky and too close to the video game. It's like make them more realistic, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it didn't make much sense that the humans would wear that kind of armor, but they did in the game. And but the
yeah.
orcs, again, the vibe around the community has always been about this movie very serviceable. Yeah, we know that the CGI at the time looked really good, but the whole thing was like that's actually what they look like too. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was cool. I appreciated what they were trying to do there. And it felt like, again, that's the challenge, I think, with this world and this lore is that you have this solid, dedicated, super enthused fan base. And then you have people who are like, I just want to watch a good movie or like an
Yeah.
action movie. And the action is incredible in this. Some of the fighting is awesome. They do some really cool, unique things. I love like the griffins coming in there. The wolves that they ride are badass.
Oh yeah.
All of that stuff is really, really cool. It feels like two warring factions from two different worlds, and I think they crushed it on that.
And importantly, both on equal grounds morally. And I think that's something that they struggled with because I know for like the mainstream viewers, they would have just assumed the ugly guys are the bad guys. But Blizzard was very adamant. We don't care if this movie bombs. They need to be equal because our fan base actually leans towards the orcs, towards the horde. And so, but yeah, generally are 50-50. So you can't belittle one of us. And that was one thing as closely as you and I watch Marvel, the fan base was watching the development of this movie and they kept saying like, don't worry, we're going to make sure it's equal. It's really important.
Yeah. Do you think like imagine if they had just kind of followed the orcs for most of the movie and we had just a little taste of the alliance, but they were still able to kind of paint them as not the evil ones, maybe that there's just somebody evil in. Again, maybe you're right. Maybe it would have been done better as a series, but
It's
I don't
so
know.
much
Do
better
you
series.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, it might have been done even better had we just kind of stuck with Duratan, Draka, and then Garona?
If they did this as like almost an anime, or I really want like Netflix to do like their Castlevania version of this, I think an animated version of this would be a lot easier to do. I mean, you could have Blizzard do all the animation for it; they're top notch at that, and we would be happy with that. But that way, you could develop the relationships, develop the rivalries. There are for the Horde, we just saw the orcs. We barely saw who else is in the alliance. We saw them sitting around
Yeah,
the table, but that was
I
it.
was
But the
I was
Horde has that
missing.
too.
Yeah, I was missing like the elves. It didn't feel like they were there. The dwarves, they didn't feel like they were there.
Yeah,
Like we see them at the end once they're kind of crowning Lothar the new king. But it
yeah.
was, it was kind of a bummer not seeing them in the battle. Of course, it seems like the one also I feel like let down for me of this movie was the ending because it feels very open ended. It feels like this is just the start of something, and it felt
Yeah.
like they were queuing up something for the future and not necessarily just trying to like hammer the best story home in number one. It felt like they wanted a two and three, and
They
I don't know. I,
because they
I guess
kind
I
of
feel
had
that.
to.
Right,
And
right.
even this story, this small part of the story, I mean, you are just at day one. It's hard because you have to get like the studios involved to make another movie. If it was just up to Blizzard, they would definitely totally would. And then like I will say, the biggest audience cheer in the theaters for this movie, the biggest part wasn't all the wars. It was the baby roaring at the end, because that baby is Thrall, the big orc that went to go talk to the human in that trailer you watched. That's Thrall.
Yeah. Oh
And
wow.
so that's the little baby. So when the little baby roars, we're like, "That's our war chief, baby!" We're all cheering for this little baby more than anybody else. And it's because there's so much more story to tell. And so it's
Right.
like at the end of a Spider-Man thing, I'm gonna go back to that. If all of a sudden you saw like, oh, it ended off with Spider-Man, all of a sudden you saw a little pumpkin roll around on the ground, you're like, "Oh my God, Green Goblin's on the next one." It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, this movie had a tough job, I think. There was,
That's it.
so much to pack into one movie, and it because of that, I feel like it is a little overstuffed, but at the same
Yeah.
time, again, like the action's great. As a fan, like you and understanding the lore, it had to be awesome just being able to like watch this on the big screen and be
There's
like,
so many things. Like, okay, so when he walks in, the spell, everything they do has a name. The weapons have names. The spells that they're all doing has names. That's spell reflect. That's polymorph. So he does polymorph on the guard where he turns him into a sheep, and it's
mm-hmm,
one of the best lines in the movie. And you have to be a World of Warcraft fan. He says, "Oh, we've only got a minute. We gotta go." So that's a throwaway line. Most people would be like, "Oh, we've only got a minute." It's something you say all the time. No, that spell lasts 1 minute. So literally, he
right,
has a minute to get that thing done because the spell will revert. And so it's
yeah,
just like, oh, that's cool. And like
that's
later on, you
funny.
see them running by a stone. You're like, oh, that's a her stone. You hear the murgle of a murloc in the beginning of the movie. And like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. You actually, that was going to be one of my facts, which was
Okay.
about that spell, the polymorph spell. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, maybe we should get into fun facts.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because like, seriously, I could go on with the work for too long. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's get into fun facts here. Bill Westenhofer, the lead visual effects supervisor for the film, is a longtime World of Warcraft player and has mentioned getting up at 2 a.m. to raid with his guild while on film sets. Sorry. Robert Kaczynski, who is also a diehard Warcraft player, recalls producers telling him to turn off the game while making Pacific Rim. So that's they aimed for WoW players. Henry Cavill, he's Alliance, but avid World of Warcraft player, and
Right.
he got the call to play Superman in the middle of the raid, so he turned the call down because he's in the middle of the raid, so he couldn't answer the phone. And
Oh my
so
God.
the first call for Superman, he was in the middle of raiding, and I was like, yeah, damn right you don't end raid for that.
Wow.
So yeah,
Right, because there's no pause, right, in this
no,
game. Like for people who don't know, like yeah, it's
yeah, a raid is the pinnacle of what you would be doing in the game. It's really the best thing. So essentially, it's 20 players in we call it a raid, but it's like a big building. You could just we'll simplify things. 20 players that have to synchronize. I mean, I have Excel sheets and stuff like that associated with this. They have to synchronize their abilities. One person makes a mistake, everybody dies. So nobody can make a
wow.
mistake.
If you
Each
Leroy
fight takes
Jenkins, it's over,
yeah,
huh?
Valley or Jenkins asshole. Every fight takes about 10 minutes. There's usually about nine bosses in a room, and a lot of times you're progressing, which is what Henry Cavill is doing, which means you're fighting the same boss and getting a millisecond better every time you pull. And so, like the longest for me has been about 3 months on the same boss, 2 to 3 times a week for 4 hours a night, practicing this one boss to get it down. And you're working with 20
Wow.
other people, but that feeling of when you and 20 people accomplish something that only 500 different people in the world have done is unsurmountable. It's the best feeling in video games. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, raids are a big deal. Again, that kind of cooperation with 20 other people, there's no other video game I can think of that does that. Maybe 4 or 5 when you're playing Call of Duty, not 20, not that tight knit. Yeah,
Yeah, God, that's amazing. Yeah, that sounds like a professional NFL team, but even with more people on the field
yeah,
and,
it's that coordinated too.
exactly. Wow, incredible.
Life-size weapons and suits of armor were built for the orcs, despite the orcs being completely CGI. Their motion capture, sorry. This was mainly for photographic references and so that they could use them as props on the set. So a lot of that was just because Blizzard wanted to make sure that the armor was real. As in like, oh, I recognize that armor, that's the war song armor of this guy. Like every little piece you could recognize. So they had to actually make the armor so that the legendary, I think it was legendary that made this, knew they were referencing the right things. They didn't just make a suit of armor. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
This is what that armor looks like. It's important.
Wow. I mean, yeah, and it makes sense for the actors too, because just from a scale of things, like where do I look? How big would his sword
Yeah,
be? How big would his armor be? Like where's my eye line gonna be? All of that stuff seems to make a ton of sense. So even having one practical piece of prop for the actors to kind of act off of seems like it makes a ton of sense.
yeah. Okay, Duncan Jones, who's the director for this, did not direct a lot of things before this, but got the role because of this. Said that the original script was very one-sided. He stated it, quote, was a stale fantasy trope of humans are the good guys and the monsters are the bad guys. After signing on to direct, he made major edits to the story as well as the script, so both factions could tell their side of the story. he got the approval for Blizzard, who were also trying to find a way to change that story. So that's when they were like, boom, you're our guy. Before this, he made 4 movies, all well received, but underwhelming in the box office. They didn't care about the box office at all.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, when you have a vision, when you're loyal to your fan base, I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's not always where you can kind of satisfy the people who are your fans always, and then also just make it a commercial hit. Like sometimes those things don't align, and we see where they kind of put their priorities.
Yeah. Let's see. Recognized by his ponytail and iconic acts, Grimashal Scream makes a few appearances during the film. While he doesn't speak or involve himself in the story, his presence is still a subtle nod to all the diehard fans. And there's Grimash. His son, Grimashal Scream, which eventually will become a bad guy. He's also a good guy. It's complicated, like everything else. So just as a quick little World of Warcraft thing, I got to do this. It'll drive me nuts if I don't. So Thrall's our war chief. He is going to then join the Earthen Ring, which means he's going to basically lead like all shamans and try to be like, planeteer. And he puts Garrosh in charge. He calls Garrosh his brother because they're both from the old school orcs. And so he does that, and they have the same grandma. Anyways, and Garrosh ends up leading us into full-on war. Like full-on kill alliance, no prisoners, evil. Thrall comes back to try to stop him, and they two have one of those Makars where it's like no magic fights. And
Right,
out
the
of
one-on-one
pure
battle.
rage, out of pure rage over what he's done to the Horde and making us wartime again, he kills Garrosh using magic. And so then Thrall is like banished from his magic, like the elements turned against him, and he then becomes a farmer and leaves the Horde and everything like that for a while. So it's a
He
really
turns
big
into
deal that he did
Thanos.
that. What's that? He
Yeah, I
becomes
said he
Thanos.
turns
Yeah,
into Thanos.
you're right. Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't catch it for a second.
no worry.
But yeah, so it's a big deal. Like so Gramash is his dad. So when you see Gramash, you're like, okay, and Gramash, and he ended up killing a big famous demon. I'm gonna keep going. Let me keep going. Here we go. Sorry.
Right.
Chris Metzen, who you saw on stage, the lead story writer for Blizzard Entertainment at the time, and the voice of many key characters, including Thrall, in the Warcraft series, is also in charge of the story of the film. So he was in charge of making sure the story was as accurate as possible. He's also
Wow.
one of the vendors in the streets of Stormwind. So
Right. He's like a guy cheering in the background, right? Like,
yeah.
nice.
There are a ton of other things. It did extremely well in China, of all places. It did really well. China's got a long history with World of Warcraft. It's kind of tricky because they can't show. I think it's considered the Risen Dead, but they can't show bones essentially. And so with the game, World of Warcraft is actually redesigned for them a little bit differently, because we have a race in the Horde called the Undead, and they have bones exposed, and so they redesigned those characters to not show bones. We have bone dragons that'll show those, but sadly, just last year, due to some government stuff on their end, a lot of those players had to stop using Blizzard in China, and all those characters, all those players have lost their communities. It just sucks so bad. So
Yeah.
as a
Bummer.
fellow WoW player, and we have all been like really giving our support to them, because these are friends that they make. Like I've got friends I've had for the last, like literally this week, by the way, is the 19th anniversary of World of Warcraft.
Wow.
I haven't played the game since 2007.
I
That's
said wow, and then all of a sudden I was like, that was a
yeah,
dumb comment.
yeah, that's all right. That works. But like to think like I got friends that I've made back in 2007 and stuff today. If you were to say like, boom, because my government doesn't agree with the way this company works or whatever, all of a sudden none of you guys could talk to each other. It just sucks.
It
And
does,
so
yeah. I mean, you
yeah,
could relate it to another sport too. Like, let's say you're just a soccer player, or not just, but like you play soccer. You have friends that you meet up week in and week out and play soccer, and it's been going on for years and years and years, and all of a sudden the government
yeah,
says, "Hey, you can't play soccer." What do you do? Like that seems
yeah.
super unfortunate. That's tough. Oof. It's
My
crazy.
friend Tabby met her husband in World of Warcraft, and he was my DM whenever I played D&D as a player. Um, but it's so funny that she was Alliance and he was Horde, and they met each other,
Star-crossed
and
lovers.
oh, it's worse than that. So her family are all Alliance players. Her dad is a guild leader and everything, like I am. And so, like, she had a hard time bringing him home to introduce him. And, like, there was a little bit of, like, you're bringing over a Horde member to their house. Now they all get
Wow.
along. And he's still strictly Horde. He doesn't play any Alliance, but she plays both sides. And she actually was one of our
Yeah, she
healers, and he
does.
was one of our DPS. But it's just so, and I actually met her sister and like that at BlizzCon. But it's just funny that like, that's the community that's built in this game. There's people, countless marriages and kids born because of this game. And
Yeah.
Joe, who is from Geek Freaks, the earlier seasons or episodes, his son, his middle name is Arthas, which is a character from World of Warcraft. And yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy how
That's
good the community is.
incredible.
And so it's neat to
Yeah.
see. Like literally those box office numbers are WoW players coming out to watch it. We know that much.
Right, right. So, I think it was globally a success, maybe not domestically. Do you think
No.
we ever see this property get another on-screen appearance, whether it is a series, whether it is animation,
Yeah.
outside of the game?
I think we will at some point. It might be a little bit, and I think they'll probably redo it. I don't think they'll just do a sequel as much as I wish they would, because all this story is good and all, but we're all waiting for them to get to Arthas. He's like the big, and you saw a lot of Arthas at BlizzCon. He's the guy in the armor. So I do think we'll get another one. I actually want them to go. I would like for Blizzard just to make it, but go animation is their best bet.
Nice. Yeah.
And I think
The
we'll get an
cinema-
Overwatch one too. I think Overwatch is also like the other beloved franchise that would do well on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cool story. I think for a while though, just the cinematics that we saw at BlizzCon are incredible. Like it's probably so damn expensive. It probably takes an insane amount of time. But if you could bring that to a series or a season at once every 2 years, oh my God, would people eat it up? I mean, it just
Yeah,
looks so incredible. So if you've never played the game like me, if you have no familiarity with it, I think that this movie does a pretty good entry. Hopefully, we've described it well enough to where you can kind of jump in and understand it a little bit. But go online and watch these cinematics because it truly is beautiful. Like it's been in the last 5 years, such an incredible time for video game properties and video game movies and shows between Cyberpunk and The Last of Us. But I think you could rank these cinematics at least up there with it. I think this movie is definitely worth a watch. It has a lot of really, really cool action. If you don't really try to think too hard about the story as a
Yeah.
newcomer, you can enjoy this. There are a lot of common typical characters in it, but at the same time it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. For me, it's probably as far as like letterbox scores goes, maybe like a 3.5 out of 5. But yeah, I hope that they do more with this property because it's so beloved. It is so cared about. The people put so much time and effort into this. Like I want to see more of this
Yeah.
on the silver screen.
I'm not going to give it a review because it won't be fair anyways. But I do suggest you do check it out. And then if you have any questions about it, please message me. I'll always talk about it.
Yeah. If not, wish him a happy birthday. Yeah,
Yeah, I
don't
did
forget.
that too. But yeah, it's a delight. It's a good peek at, like, I would watch I don't play a lot of Warhammer, but I'm looking forward to the Warhammer series coming up just because I know there's so many diehard fans of Warhammer and it's got Henry Cavill in it. But I'm looking forward to that because it'll be a peek into that world. Take a peek in this one too. It's really worth your time. There's so many wonderful books that are tied into this. Christy Golden, who's at BlizzCon, who signed one of my books, she's got a hand in making all of this too, and so it's a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. If you have any questions, ask Frank. I feel like you have all the books, and you
I am
read
holding
all
back
of
so
them.
much right now. I want to geek out so hard.
You're like, don't let the dam break. Hold it in.
Yeah. One more thing. Yeah, just go off. Oh, man.
Right. Well, right on. Thanks. I think that kind of wraps it up for us on this one. Oh yeah.
What's our next
other
one?
thing? That is a good question. Jeez,
Your face.
that is a good question. That's a good question.
I'll edit around it.
Yeah, sorry about.
Oh,
I
no,
forgot
your
that was a
face is
part of
so
the
much
show.
fun. Oh shit.
Yeah, this has to come out in like a bloopers reel at the end of the year.
We have been
That's a good
so
point.
busy with like Loki's and stuff like that that we forget that the movie challenging part is the part that
It's kind of the name of the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do planes, trains, and automobiles for
That's my Thanksgiving
Thanksgiving.
gold right there. Hell yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I want
I'm
to do.
down. Okay, so do
All
you
right.
want
So
to?
yeah. Yep. For this week's challenge, because it's coming up in Thanksgiving, I want to do Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I think is a Thanksgiving
Yeah,
classic and one of your
it's pure
favorites, right?
gold. Oh, it's one of my absolute favorites. John Candy, everything. It's such a perfect movie. Yeah.
I haven't really watched the full thing before. I think I've watched clips of it, but yeah, I don't think I've seen the
Are
whole
you for
movie.
real? I see
I'm
it every
serious.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I
That
don't
and
think
the
I've
Cowboys
watched it
game are
all
the
the
two
way
things
through.
I do. I cannot believe that. Oh, I'm so excited for you to watch. How are you
Yeah.
challenging me to this? Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for you to see this now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a classic. I think I got to jump into it. So, yes, that's a choice. Looking forward to this movie.
It's yeah, it's beautiful. It's so funny and will break your heart at some scenes. It's really that good. So,
God,
yeah,
I'm good at choosing
looking forward to it.
challenges.
Sure are.
All right, everybody. Well,
All right,
thanks so
guys.
much for joining us this week. Let us know what you think about this movie or if you're going to see it. And if you have a challenge for us in the future,
Yes.
please drop it on us on the socials. Please leave us a review if you feel so inclined. We would love to hear what you think about any of these challenges. And if you have some suggestions, we want to hear from you guys. So thanks so much. And as always, aloha.
See you in the next
All right,
one.
thanks.